look to inch themselves a lot more forward in this Australian Grand Prix weekend, and a lot of big things coming for the team in green. Now, we already know that they are the second best car so far this year, and not a lot is missing for them to actually catch up to this Red Bull squad. Sure, they're 7/10 off of race pace, but they lose almost 6/10 in straight line speed to Red Bull. Well, guess what's coming in Australia? I'm going to talk about it and really get more into depth about everything that this Aston Martin team is really planning for its upgrades coming within the next 3 or 4 races. Before I do that, please like and subscribe. It would mean the world for me. You guys are killing it, and thank you all so much. I love the support that I'm getting, and you guys just make this super easy to make these videos and just have fun and really just produce the content that I do. And I hope that it's only getting better and more enjoyable for you guys. If you're not subscribed, please do. It means a lot for me, and hit that like button whenever you can. Hit the notification bell as well, even if you're subbed or not. Let's get into this AMR 23 and really Aston Martin video in general for the weekend coming. So Australia is happening practically tomorrow, or if you're living in America like me, it's happening today at around 10 p.m. because, you know, the world is flipped upside down in Australia. The AMR 23 is bringing upgrades to Australia that were originally planned for later races. The big thing being talked about right now is how the Aston Martin is actually kind of being put back because of the Mercedes W14 package that they have in their rear end. As I talked about in my videos before, and what's really known now to more of the public is Aston Martin is a customer team. So they pick up the rear suspension, the gearbox, and really the rear of the car is made by the W14. We know that the W14 has a pretty extreme concept. Now their concept has to kind of be dictated towards how that gearbox is going to look and how the rear of the car is really going to perform. Because Mercedes went so extreme, and we've now just recently found out that their floor is a lot more different to any other team on the grid. I talked about in my recent video of Red Bull that the floor that Red Bull has is pretty simple, but its actual top arrow is what makes the car super fast. The same kind of goes for Aston Martin, but the reason behind this simple floor on the bottom and not producing its top speed is kind of due to Mercedes actually giving them that diffuser and the gearbox being way too big and clogging up some of that aero efficiency that it could be using for its really DRS and gaining that really straight line speed or top speed during the race. All the speed traps we've seen so far in both Bahrain and in Jeddah, Aston Martin is near towards the bottom. They were a lot better in Bahrain because they were actually able to put on a little less downforce than other teams. Still had a decent amount of downforce, but were able to actually pull off a little bit of a more efficient run down that first really turn, produce better speed through actually being able to brake faster and go through the corners more efficiently. Now, in a track like Jeddah, where overtaking is mainly done in sectors 2 and 3, where it's practically just straights and super long corners, you can't really do overtakes if you're 10 kilometers down from a team up top. It was bound to happen that Max was going to catch Fernando. If it was a race like Australia, I would argue that if Max was 15th, he wouldn't be catching Fernando, and Fernando would actually probably be on the tail of Checo for longer. Fernando was able to keep up for almost 10 laps in an Aston Martin car that is very inferior to the actual Red Bull team when it comes to straight line speed and really how it performs in its efficiency. It's a big thing when a car can actually stick within the car with that much loss of top speed. It shows that it's extremely efficient everywhere else, which we already know looking at the car. It's kind of a hybrid of a Ferrari and a Red Bull in its concept, and it kind of took the best of both worlds. It has those slide pods, that's what I call them, not really side pods, but slide pods, you know, because it's a big dip, waterfall-y. Putting this all into perspective, it isn't similar to the RB19, but the car is actually made towards the rear of the Mercedes. And if you actually put a picture side by side of the Aston Martin and the Mercedes, you can kind of see some similarities even with it being a no-pod design. It doesn't have the broad shoulders as the Mercedes, but it still does have that upper part that a lot of teams have incorporated this year on their engine cover to actually be able to perform that, what's called lateral downforce, which Aston Martin is actually extracting really well, but it's not giving the top speed that they thought it would be giving them. Mercedes did improve a little bit on their top speed by shredding some drag, but Clearly that gearbox is interfering a little bit, and there's going to have to be a couple more things that come into play for that Mercedes squad to get fully at top speed. I think even with a lot of upgrades and really trying to make that car as efficient as possible with no drag, it still might be a tad bit slower than the Red Bull on the straights, but it shouldn't be 10 kilometers slower. If Aston Martin could get anywhere near between 2 to 3 kilometers, maybe even 4 kilometers to that Red Bull, they could fight on bigger tracks and really give Red Bull a run for their money. I do predict tracks like Hungary and Monaco and Zandvoort will be extremely strong tracks for Aston Martin, and I really do see them being favorites in those tracks. But those tracks are still pretty far away, and they're going to lose out on tracks like Monza, and really Miami will be a pretty bad track for them. Baku might be even a bad track for them. Imola should be a very strong track for them. They have a lot of upgrades actually coming towards Imola. Another thing I wanted to speak about was, I spoke in my last video about a Baku upgrade. Well, they're trying to advance it, and this upgrade should be coming to actually Australia. That is the biggest thing. Australia is getting this rear wing upgrade that is supposed to improve the straight line speed. With straight line speed, this car can be very dominant. They just need to reduce the drag that this car is actually grabbing because of its actual diffuser that they can't really help. But there is actual drag throughout the whole entire car that probably Dan Fowles has found. Considering he still wants to perform over 75% of the car being different, I do expect a completely different looking AMR 23 by the end of the year with a lot less drag and a lot more straight line speed, giving Fernando a real chance at biting at the heels of these Red Bulls and maybe, just maybe, fighting for a championship if the ATR time does not go in the favor for Red Bull. Australia is the first track that this Aston Martin will really be tested at in its strengths. We know that braking is its strengths, we know that medium speed corners, which is the majority of the Australian track, and slow speed corners is where the Aston performs at its highest. High speed is something that it performs really well in, but Red Bull just has that straight line speed that actually even helps it perform even better in really the high speed corners. As we saw in Jeddah Sector 1, that was Aston Martin's strongest part of the track just because of it actually having the best downforce, but Red Bull was still able to compete due to its straight line speed. So in tracks with more medium speed and slow speed corners, that Aston Martin will perform a lot better and a lot more efficiently. Being able to conserve its tires might be a huge thing in this race because depending on the weather, if it's rainy and they need to take care of those intermediates, just like we saw last year in Japan, how Red Bull smoked Ferrari because of its actual tire degradation, I expect the same to happen in Australia if it is a rainy weekend for both Aston and Red Bull. They should be very much ahead of everybody, and with a lot of downforce, Aston could take the cake for being the favorite if it is a rainy weekend. If it is a dry weekend, it'll be a tough one, but I do have Alonso coming out getting a very high performance. It's going to be a very interesting weekend, and Australia is looking to be like a banger. I'm super excited to see what this brings, and these upgrades better be killer on this Aston Martin. A lot more to come from now, a lot more news I'm going to give you guys on Aston Martin and really any other team. Leave your thoughts down below. Please leave a like, comment. It means the world for me, and peace.